What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fatal Garage. I'm Josh Thornell, and in today's episode, we're going to be setting install Turbobay upgraded turbos into this Cadillac ATS-V. First up, we're going to go ahead and remove the driver and passenger side wheel, that way we can have access to inside the fender liner in that area. We're going to go ahead and use a 7/8 on the OEM lug nuts. Unplug our exhaust module here from the valves. So you just want to pull the little clip, squeeze together, and then pull off. And then there's one over here on this side as well. I'm going to continue on doing exhaust bolts here. First on the passenger side. Loosen this up, and this is a 15 millimeter. Most all the exhaust bolts are 15 millimeters. Just an FYI. Next, I'm going to go ahead and undo our mid exhaust hangers here. I have an exhaust hanger little tool, which is awesome. You just push that on, squeeze it through, press it through, and that's it. Your exhaust is just hanging there. I highly recommend you pick up one of these. I think this is like $20 or $15 on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below. In our engine bay, the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is go ahead and remove our engine cover here. So just remove the oil cap on this side. And then there's a T27 Torx for the other side. And then put back your oil cap just so nothing falls down in there. Next, just to make everything easy here, we're going to go ahead and remove this entire vacuum box area. There is an electrical connector back here to go ahead and undo. An electrical connector up here as well in the front. And then this electrical connector on the front gets held down with a tree. So go ahead and pry that off. And then you can just push this off to the side for now. There's an electrical connector here on this side. Go ahead and undo that. Go ahead and disconnect this side from the blow-off valve there. It just slides onto that nipple. Because again, these are the Turbo Smart blow-off valves on this particular car. And go ahead and disconnect from the intake tube right there. Undo this electrical connector right here. Follow this cable down. It connects onto the back end of this charge pipe. You can go ahead and pry that tree off and then unplug it from the wastegate. You just pull up. Now on these ones, what you do is there's one side that proceeds out a little bit there. You squeeze that in and it lines up and then it pulls off. Now on this side, the wastegate is a little bit harder to get to, so what I'm actually going to do is undo this charge pipe, or this section right here that goes from the blow-off valve back into the intake for the race circ. I'm going to go ahead and undo this connection, that way I have more access to reach my hand down there. This hose clamp right here is a number 8. Just undo that enough, slide back that hose clamp. That way we can pull this out of the way. Then able to reach down here. And take that one off the wastegate. It's a little bit tricky to get to. You have to squeeze and then actually push down. So this one's actually kind of hard to get off. I usually just take it off from this side, but since we're going to be removing the turbos as well, I figured I might as well just disconnect it actually from the turbo side. Next, go ahead and undo the 6 number 10s. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then as you're pulling up here over on this side, there is a connection that connects to the valve cover from the vacuum box, and then a connection that connects to the intercooler. Then you can just pull this out of the way. We're going to go ahead and remove the ZZP intake now. On the passenger side, the MAF sensor is down here. Go ahead and remove that. There's a gray tab with a purple connector. For the driver's side, your map is right here. Go ahead and squeeze that in. It's a black connector with a red tab. Now we're going to go ahead and remove these. This is a number 11 and 11 here on these T-bar clamps. And then this whole intake should be able to pull out. Just going to go ahead and remove the clamps completely so that way I don't lose them. On the driver's side here, we're going to go ahead and remove this PCV connection here. Push this out of the way. And then there's another 11 down here that we're going to go ahead and undo. That way we can remove this whole elbow section. And fish out this elbow section. To remove the charge pipe here on the driver's side, remove the number 10 here and number 10 here, the tool on the top. And then loosen the number 8 here worm clamp, and then just pull right off, and it comes. Moving to the passenger side, we're going to go ahead and start removing this charge pipe and the rest of the intake here. So we're going to go ahead, disconnect this air line right here, and then we're going to undo this number 8 on this worm gear for the recirc for the blow-off valve. We're going to undo the electrical connection here. This is for your MAF. We're going to remove these two number 10s here for the charge pipe on the top. Last connection for the charge pipe here is the worm gear down below that connects it back to the turbo. Depends on what orientation that is. Depends on what tool you're going to be able to use. I'm going to have to use an open head wrench at this location. Before we go ahead and remove this elbow, there is a air connection here that has one of those tamper proofs. What I find is very useful is the DSX provided fuel line disconnect tool that they provide. These are longer and actually are pliable a little bit to be able to use in here. So what you want to do is kind of seat it like you would, just like a fuel line, and then just kind of wiggle it around a little bit here. And then pull it right off. And now you didn't break it or anything like that, and you'll be able to reuse it. Lastly, to remove this intake side, there is a number 13 T-bolt clamp just like we had on the other side. Or sorry, a number 11 T-bolt clamp just like we had on the other side. We're going to go ahead and unplug this and just move it out of the way. Now before we go back under the car to disconnect the downpipes, we want to go ahead and remove our oxygen sensors, our O2 sensors, disconnect them from the top side. So there's one over here for the passenger side and one on the driver's side. Much easier to get now that the charge pipe's all out of the way and everything as well. So I like to just reach my hand in there, unplug them, raise the car, and then we'll do the entire undercarriage area and prep that. Just go ahead and reach in here and find your oxygen sensor. And just pull and disconnect it and pull it to the side. On the driver's side, our oxygen sensor is just sitting here off to the side, it looks like. Probably from the downpipe install the owner did. I'm just going to disconnect that and push that down so that way it can fall with the downpipe. Going back down to the bottom of the car, first thing I want to do is remove the O2 sensors here from the bottom side. On the passenger side, you can reach up between the resonator area for your downpipe and your transmission housing, and then it just disconnects and pulls down. And then on your passenger side, if you have an automatic, it actually just connects right here to the side of your transmission housing. There is a wire loom with your O2 sensor, and you can just unplug that. Pull that down and out of the way. Start undoing the rest of your downpipe here. I'm going to loosen up these two connections. They're 15s. Remove the 8 15 millimeter nuts here that hold on the downpipes. And then once that comes off, I'm just gonna remove this all in one piece. Our next piece here is actually to remove a lot of this undercarriage. That way we have easier access to a lot of the bolts. And then we will remove the heat shields off the turbos and then actually start removing the turbos themselves. Now we're gonna just go ahead and start removing this under paneling here. First with this front one here. So first we're gonna go ahead and we're missing a 7 screw here, but there should have been here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and those are number 7s. So we're gonna go ahead and remove those, followed by these 2 number 10s, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 number 10s in the back here. And then lastly, there's a clip that we'll go ahead and take off, and then this tray will be released. In this front area, you need to kind of press it against, it's caught on your mats here for your fender liners, so you want to press in and then release it. We'll go ahead and remove this plastic cover here. There's one on both sides here. I'm just going to remove one and then copy the same principles over to the other side. There's a number 10, 10, 10 here. There is a clip here that you want to use a trim tool, and then there's a number 7 here that you want to undo, and then this piece will fall out of the way. Last of our undercarriage pieces to take off here is this main one. It's going to be a series of number 15s, 4 15s across the front here, 4 15s here in the middle, a 15, 15, and then 15 on the outside, and then there's a nut that's a 15 as well that's inside here. Once you remove all the bolts all the way, you need to kind of push in your fender liners, and then this will just drop out of the way. And then you need to go, there's a hook on the front, go forward a little bit, hook up, and then lower. This one is extra crispy. Next, we want to start draining the fluids. We want to find our oil drain plug here, and then next to our oil filter. So we're going to go ahead and pull this plug, and we have a bucket right here. We're going to go ahead and drain the oil down into that. And we're just going to let that drain here. Once your oil flow starts to slow down a little bit, we go ahead and take off your oil filter. Next, we want to come and actually drain the coolant for the car. So what you want to do is actually locate, this is the front end of your car. This is kind of towards the passenger side. There is a little valve here at the bottom of your radiator. And then there's actually kind of a spigot here on the bottom. So what you actually want to do is just turn this valve. And then what you want to do is, because there's kind of some pressure on this a little bit, is actually I want to go ahead and put this in. So once you break this loose just a little bit here, you want to go up top and open up your coolant tank. That way you don't have any negative pressure. And then we're just gonna let that drain. Starting the remove process of the driver's side turbo here. We're gonna go ahead and remove this upper coolant line. That way we can remove the heat shield and make it easier to get the rest of the bolts off as well. So to do that, there is a W clip or a C clip here on this coolant line. So we wanna go ahead and remove that clip. I like to use just a really fine Phillips flat blade screwdriver here to kind of push it out. And then I also have, I'll put a stick magnet down there as well. just to grab it when it comes out. That way it doesn't fall down somewhere else. And then where it connects down to the side of the turbo, that is actually a 16 millimeter. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect that and then remove this coolant line. It's got this little C section right here and just clamps on. And that's your top bolt here for your coolant feed line. Those removed, go ahead and pull that out, and then you can remove this line. We're gonna go ahead and remove the heat shield. It's a number 10 here, right back here, and then on the bottom, which we'll go ahead and get from beneath the car. We're gonna go ahead and for this heat shield, we'll go ahead and get this last number 10. It's right down here on the bottom. Your heat shield from the bottom, or I believe you can get it out from the top as well. I'm just getting it out from the bottom because I'm down here. Next, we're gonna go ahead and remove the bottom oil line from the turbo. It connects into the housing here for the engine, and then also connects into the oil drain pan. There is a 10 millimeter here, and then on the other side, this engine support, so kind of up through there is where we're gonna look. I'm gonna zoom in. That way you guys can see it better. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove those two 10 millimeters. Next, coming to this other side of the oil filter here, we want to go ahead and remove this white clip here that's on this coolant line, and then there's another W or a C clip that's on that line that we want to go ahead and pop off. That way we can remove that line from the top side. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Jump here, pull off the cover. I'm going to finish removing this coolant line. Is the top bolt here on the turbo. It's the feed line, and it is a 16 millimeter. And you can pull this line out of the way. Lastly, go ahead and disconnect this last 16 millimeter on the side of the turbo for the coolant line. Last thing we want to do here to be able to remove this driver's side turbo is remove the four 15 millimeter bolts that attach it here to the heady fold from the turbo housing. So go ahead and do those, and then we're going to go ahead and remove the turbo. And just slide off the turbo. Coming over to the table here, you can see that this is the OEM turbo that we just took out of the car, and then this is our brand new Turbobay turbo. So first thing that you notice is the main difference here is that our OEM has this snout on it that this Turbobay does not. We actually want to reuse this snout over onto our Turbobays after we do a few modifications, which I'll go over. So let's go ahead and remove that. That way we can do a little bit more of a direct comparison. This requires three 10 millimeters to go ahead and remove. So looking at our two turbos here, we can see that there's a considerable size difference here between the two wheels. So I'm going to go ahead and measure those. It looks like our stock wheel is right about, or this housing is right about 47.7. And over here, we're looking at about 51.7. So a 4 millimeter size increase on the wheel diameter, which is pretty drastic. And then also the actual shape of the propeller blades on the stock turbo, you can see are a little bit almost raked back, it seems, or bent backwards. And on the new turbo, they are all very straight to very crisp blades. And I don't know how well you'll be able to see the exhaust side of the house here, but just to show you, it is much smaller as well on our OEM turbo versus these upgraded Turbobays. It looks like these have been ported out, as well as with a new exhaust side wheel as well. Can't exactly tell the size difference here, but it looks to be right about the same, about 4mm difference as it was on the intake side versus the OEM as well. Now we want to go ahead and put a new snout back on here. Since our new turbo is 52 or about 51.7mm or 52mm, I did go ahead and port out another snout that I had from a previous set of turbos. So you can tell that it is substantially larger here, and it matches the intake side of the new turbo. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on here. Now what we want to do here is, instead of using a OEM gasket here, the gasket is smaller, as you can see here, than the actual diameter of that hole. So we don't want to restrict it with just the gasket, and also that gasket seat won't do very well since it won't have that surface to press against. So instead, what we're going to use is a little bead of black RTV here. Just real thin with our finger here, get it on the mating surface, and then go ahead and put our 3 number 10mm back on. I'm just gonna kind of smear it. The reason being is I don't need this to go everywhere. It's not seeing a lot of pressure. I just need it to seal. So I'm just putting a little bead of sealant here. Kind of use up what's ever on my finger here. Spread it around, and then I'm actually going to go ahead, and I like to just kind of do a ring around just to kind of get kind of the sticky surface onto the new surface as well. Wipe off any excess that you have here on your towel, and then I'm going to go ahead and put our number 10s already in it. This charge pipe or snout. The reason being is that it has these little plastic grommets or connectors in there that kind of hold it in place. And now what I want to do is line it up perfectly with our holes. And start to thread in our number 10s just a little bit, making sure everything is lined up. And I like to just kind of snug everything up for now. And then what we'll do is we'll come back later and we'll actually torque this to spec, which will be 689 inch-pounds, which will be between 7 to 8 foot-pounds for all your number 10s here. Now, starting the removal process here for the passenger side turbo, we're going to go ahead and remove the coolant reservoir here. That requires a 10mm here on this side. There's a clamp here for this coolant line, and then a clamp in the back for another coolant line. So we're going to go ahead and remove those, and then slide this up and off. There's 2 pegs that it sits on in the, down below that just sits on them. So this is actually the only bolt, and remove all this. For pliers, just squeeze back that clamp, and then just pull it right off the nipple. And then in the back here, there's a bigger hose clamp, probably about a 1 inch diameter almost. Remove that clamp and pull the hose off. As you can see, this is the hose that we just pulled off. It's more actually about probably a 3/4. One also wiring harness right here that has a tree clip into your coolant reservoir tank. So just go ahead and pop that off, or you can undo the clip as well. And just pull the sink out. Now that we got the coolant tank out of the way, it opens up this area a lot more. I just went ahead and tucked some of these cables just out of the way. This coolant hose that was just over here, I'm just going to tuck it over and actually just kind of between those 2 lines for now, just out of the way. And then our big coolant hose that goes to the back here, I was planning on just zip tying it up and out of the way here, but actually I can just tuck it to the other side of our strut tower here. So I'm just going to do that, and that just keeps it out of the way, and now I have a nice big open area to work in. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove the heat shield from the passenger side turbo. There are 3 number 10s. You can get all 3 of them from the top. The first one is here, right here on the top. I like to just break them loose and then I'll get them later. And one here a little bit further down on the side. And then that last one is a little bit further. It's further down here on this side. It's a little bit tricky to get to. You just have to know exactly kind of where it's at. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove this feed line right here, this coolant line. So it's a number 16 that connects to the side of the turbo. It's the top one on this side. And then this is another one of those W clips. So we want to go ahead and press this clip out and make sure to obviously grab it obviously when it comes out. That way it doesn't fall down to the abyss. Like so. Next, go ahead and undo the 16 millimeter. And then go ahead and remove that line. Next, I'm going to go ahead and remove the 2 10 millimeters on the bottom of the turbo for the oil drain on that. I'm just going to come from beneath the turbo down here and just come up. And then I just pull that down out of the way a little bit, and I'm just going to leave it connected to the actual engine housing itself. We're just going to disconnect it here from the turbo. Next, we're going to go ahead and start moving things out of the way. That way we can go ahead and disconnect the alternator and be able to move it forward just a little bit to go ahead and get one of the coolant lines for the turbo. So first thing that we need to do for ours is go ahead and remove our Mighty Mouse catch can. And these are an 11 millimeters, so you need an 11 millimeter wrench and an 11 millimeter socket. We're just going to go and push this off to the other side here for now. Using a 1/2 inch drive, you want to go ahead and locate your accessory bell idler pulley. Go ahead and put this on it and loosen, apply a little pressure, loosen up that belt and slip the belt off the pulley. Pull the belt off of the alternator and just out of the way a little bit. Next, go ahead and locate your bracket here that connects for your alternator support bracket. There is a 15 millimeter here, down here, and through here that you need to undo this front plate. And then as well, there's a 13 millimeter in the back here that I'll show you after we do these front ones. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these and then move to the next step. Now these are going to be a little bit specific in terms of size, length of the bolt, so make sure to lay them out specifically on the floor or on a table somewhere. The bottom one, the furthest bottom one, is much longer. And this last one in the front here, it's kind of tricky to get to. You need to go underneath this vacuum tank right here, kind of behind it, and over and then up. Next, I'm going to go ahead and remove the bottom 16 on the left-hand side, and just remove that and get that out of the way. And now I'm going to go ahead and remove this top 16 millimeter for the oil feed. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove the 4 15 millimeter bolts that hold on the turbo to the actual manifold itself. And then we'll be able to slide the turbo essentially backwards a little bit to be able to undo one more bolt connection for the alternator, slide that forward, undo one more line for the oil feed, and then be able to actually remove the turbo after that. So next, let's go ahead and remove these 4 15 millimeters and slide the turbo back. Now we need to slide the turbo back just like we did, allowing some space up here in the front. That way I can pass a wrench down to a 13 millimeter down there to undo the last bracket for the alternator. Next you want to find the number 13 down here for the alternator, and we're going to go ahead and remove that. And all we're trying to expose here is this line here as it comes across, and it comes over and down right here where it goes into the housing. There's another clip, and we're going to go ahead and undo that. It's just on the other side here. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that, and then we should be able to remove the turbo. Now that we got that line disconnected, go ahead and pull it out. And then you can remove this line. And then you can remove the turbo. And then do a bit of cleanup in here for where oil and coolant, etc., residual spilt during that teardown. Now we have our passenger side over here on the table. We want to go ahead and remove this snout. Set our stock snout to the side. As you can see, we've already ported out our other snout here to match our new turbo. So we're going to go ahead and put this snout on. Black RTV on our finger here. And just like at the last side, just spread it around a little bit. Just like the last side, doesn't need to be too thick. Yeah, we just need to be, you know, a good covering. That way it can mate to the other surface nice and easily. And I have just a tiny bit left on my finger here. I like to, like I did last time, just to go around here and just spread some of the coating at least onto the surface here. That way it gets it a nice kind of sticky surface for the rest of it. And then go ahead and wipe the rest just onto your cloth here. Slide in our 10 millimeters and then line up the holes. Now since we have that gasket maker on there, I like to just go where we're kind of just stop a little bit of resistance here. And then I'm going to actually let that sit for a couple hours, and then I'm going to go ahead and torque this down to spec. Next we're going to go ahead and start the reinstall process of our passenger side turbo. First you want to go ahead and prep the area, clean it up, and make sure that it's ready to go, and also clean the surface, the mating surface here for your actual turbo. Next you want to go ahead and put a new gasket onto your turbo or your oil return line from your turbo. It's a metal plate gasket. You just slide that on. I actually still have, the screws are still in there too, the number 10s, because they stay in there with those plastic retainers, and it actually makes lining it up with the bottom of the turbo really easily. Next we're going to go ahead and drop in our passenger side turbo. And kind of slot it towards the back for now. Next we need to go ahead and put in the line that we had to take out. It slips behind the turbo and slips behind the alternator as well. Kind of snake it in here and make sure you get it into the correct location onto the turbo as well, so it's nice and lined up. Sorry guys, it's a little bit hard to film kind of where it's at. Trying to get my body down into here and still be able to get a camera down here is kind of impossible. But where we had to slide the alternator forward, behind there is our oil feed for our passenger side turbo. You want to go ahead and slide in that male port of that, and then we're going to slide in our new W-ring or clip, or whatever you want to call this, back into that location. So just like as you see for the top port, we want to go ahead and slide that in. What I like to do is just use a pair of long reach pliers here, or needle nose pliers, and you're going to hold on to the clip here, and it's best to kind of look at the location down there, see how it's oriented, to know how you want to set up the and hold the clip on this. We're going to go ahead and feed this in. Now that we've got that first connection done, we want to go ahead and rearrange and slide back our alternator into its location. Next, we want to go ahead and slot our alternator back into place and slide in our 15 millimeters that we took out from the front side. Remember, the long bolt goes on the very bottom. We want to go ahead and feed in this last 15 millimeter bolt here. What I like to do is on these tight places where I want to be able to hold the bolt into the socket while I feed it in, I like to just put a piece of tape on the inside there, and then it'll just stick to the socket when I pull it out. But as you can see, now that bolt isn't going anywhere, and I can feed this in and guide it where it needs to be. I'm going to go ahead and slide in the 13 millimeter, the last bolt for the alternator. And we're going to go ahead and use our 1/2 inch drive. And we're going to put on our belt. Take a second, make sure everything is routed correctly. Go ahead and put on your back on your belt. And then relieve the tension. Next, we're going to go ahead and replace our Mighty Mouse catch can. Line this back up and slide it into place. It's an 11 millimeter. Next thing we want to go ahead and do here is line up our turbo. What I like to do is I'm going to go ahead and slip in one bolt now without the gasket in place. Once I have one bolt in place, I'm going to slip down the gasket. The gasket goes the bigger part of the gasket goes towards the bottom. I like to get that started, and then I'll feed back out that first bolt, slide up the gasket, the way it gets captured, and then just thread it back in. And then feed in your other turbo bolts. And then we're going to go ahead and tighten all these up to 43 foot-pounds. Go ahead and torque these up. Now we want to go ahead and reinstall our top oil feed port. It's a banjo bolt here. So we have that line that we already put on. It wraps around and it mounts to the top of the turbo going straight down. So we have our banjo bolt here. We need to slip on one of these brand new washer gaskets. You want to go nice and easy when you're putting these on. That way you don't rip that O-ring. Kind of does an O-ring seal there. Go ahead and slip that into the feed line. And then we have another washer here, another washer gasket that we need to go ahead and slip onto the bottom end of that bolt, and then line it up with a hole and start threading it in. I'm actually going to move my light here a little bit so I can see better. What I just did is I pulled that fitting style to the side there and lined it up with that washer, and then slipped on the washer. The washer gasket will kind of hold it onto the threads, at least into place. and now I'm threading it into the port itself. It is a 16 millimeter, and it just feeds straight down. Torque it out to the desired spec. Now we want to go ahead and reinstall our bottom coolant line here, our coolant return line. There's another banjo bolt here. We want to slip on one of these washer gaskets again. And line it up and slip it into place. And then just like the last time, I like to just slip this on to the other side if possible. Once you get those gaskets on, go ahead and thread it into the port. And then it is a 16 millimeter as well. And we're gonna go ahead and torque that up. Lastly, before we go to the bottom side of the turbo, let's go ahead and install this top coolant line. It feeds into our block here, right behind the snout here on the passenger side turbo, and then the top port on the side of the turbo, like I said. So I'm gonna go ahead and feed this in, and tricky, just feed it behind the turbo and into the port, and then also line it up on the side of the turbo, and then start to feed in that banjo. And we did put new washer gaskets on that banjo as well, as we're doing so. Before we tighten the bolt on the bottom, I like to go ahead and slip it in our clip here on the top side. Now we got the clip in, we want to go ahead and torque up this line. Next, prepare the driver's side turbo a little bit further. We want to go ahead and clean the ports just a little bit. And then clean the ports on our oil drain as well from our turbo. Just clean these up nice. Now on our passenger side turbo, we were able to leave this on. So it's essentially we left it connected to the housing of the engine. So we left that connected, and we just disconnected here from the turbo. So this is sitting basically underneath the turbo right now, still disconnected. We haven't gone underneath the car to make that connection. Basically, when we lower down the turbo, it basically is right above it, and I'll be able to make that connection because this is on a somewhat of a swivel. So that'll be easy enough. On the driver's side, you have to disconnect it, or it's the easiest to disconnect it from the actual block itself with these two 10 millimeters. So we're just having to swap it over basically from the OEM turbo to our new Turbobay turbo. Now you want to go ahead and use a new gasket for this as well, which we got with our gasket kit. Pop that on like so. Slide in our two 10 millimeters. And line it up. I like to just hand thread these in, just hand tight. And then these get torqued to 89 inch-pounds. Lastly, in preparation for our driver's side turbo, is I'm just going to go ahead and prep these lines by taking off the banjo bolt, putting on a new washer gasket, and then put another washer gasket on the other side. And like I said, that holds that bolt in place as we go ahead and put this in. I'm going to do this to the oil feed side. And then lastly, we have that line that's still in the car. I'm just going to go ahead and put the washer gasket on the bolt for now, so that way it's ready. And then we have another washer gasket that will go on the other side of that fitting once it's called for. Next, we want to go ahead and slip in our driver's side turbo. I just slip it in right there, drop it down, Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and slip our gasket into place and slide a bolt through. Our last connection we need to make here on our passenger side is down below. It's our oil drain port, or drain side. So it connects to the bottom port on the turbo. That is a 10 millimeter. Go ahead and feed your socket onto that, thread it in, which you can by hand. And then you want to go ahead and torque these up to 89 inch-pounds. Last thing we need to do on the bottom side before going back to the top is we want to connect the oil drain side on the passenger side turbo. So if you remember, it connects from the turbo that we connected out of the car on the table, that port, and then comes down to the block of the car. So we want to connect that. It's 2 number 10s. So you want to go ahead and feed those in there and then line those up. What I like to do is use a number 10 with I like to put just a piece of tape here, and it actually holds the number 10s a little bit more firm. That way when I go ahead and place them in there, they don't fall out. Go ahead and line up your wrench with the number 10. Torque these up to 89 inch-pounds. Coming back to the top side on our driver's side, we're going to go ahead and feed in the 2 remainder bolts to hold on the turbo, the 15 millimeters. Next, our bottom coolant port that we have here on our turbo that we left in the car that we didn't remove. I want to go ahead and slide in our banjo bolt here. We put already on our washer here, and then I have my other one in hand. So I'm going to go ahead and slide our washer onto the other side here. Yeah, swivel socket here, 16. Makes it easy to go ahead on our torque wrench. And this is going to go to 26 foot-pounds. Next, you want to come underneath the car and feed in your oil feed line. You kind of need to go up and over your drive shaft area. And then it'll fall down into the other side. And you're going to line it up with that port. So lines up with the top port on the turbo. And then there's a fitting here that it slides into. There's a port here on the side of the block of the engine. Lastly, we want to go ahead and install our W clip, or a clip that goes on that line, before we go back up to the top side. Going to the top side, we want to go ahead and line up and tighten up that 16 millimeter for that oil feed. And then we want to go ahead and torque that to spec. And then we have our last line here, which is our coolant feed line. And it goes into our top ports here on the side. And then it also lines up with the port here that goes into the actual head itself, the block itself. So you want to go ahead and line that up. Lastly, we want to go ahead and put in our W clip into this port location. Next, we're going to go ahead and reinstall our heat shields, starting here with the passenger side. Passenger side heat shield and driver side heat shield both take 3 number 10 millimeters. I like to just go ahead and place them in and get them all lined up before I tighten anything really down. Go ahead and slip in your driver side heat shield. We got both of our heat shields in. Now let's go ahead and let's put our coolant tank in. It lines up with 2 posts on the bottom, and then this other post up top. It's kind of tricky to get them all 3 in there. I want to go ahead and rehook our coolant lines. Squeeze that together, slide that on. There's one here in the back. Remember, we touch it onto the other side of our strut tower here. Untuck it from that side and then slide it onto that nipple. Now we're going to move to installing the downpipes. We want to go ahead and put in our ring gaskets here onto the turbo side. And do the other side too. Kind of hard to film both sides at the same time, so bear with me. Next, I'm just going to take 2 nuts here for our downpipes and just prep them with a little bit of anti-seize. And then I'm just going to put this on the arm of my lift here so it's off to the side. And now we want to go ahead and we're going to pass up our downpipes. Sometimes these can be a little bit of a pain to line up with these H-pipe.
Three hours later.
Now we're just going to go ahead and feed on the rest of our bolts here. Wrapping up our downpipe install, and before we install the intake, I want to go ahead and charge in our oxygen sensors, or O2 sensors, the top ones. And so our driver's side one, I'll be able to easily access back here, and then our passenger side on there, it's just a lot easier to get in before our intake's in here or anything else. Just to be able to reach back here. And go over here and do the passenger side. Now we're going to start on the reinstall process for intake, starting here with these snouts, these transitions that go onto our turbo. You can know which side of the turbo they go on. The side that has basically these ridges on it is the side that this transition goes onto. The other side that has a ring stop is the side that goes for the actual intake itself. Go ahead and slide that in, and then this is an 8mm. Go ahead and come over to the driver's side and slip that side on. Off camera, I went ahead and filled up our coolant again. Went through a couple times of filling up this reservoir. Went through about almost 2 jugs of coolant. And then I also filled it up with fresh oil here. So I went ahead and already did that. And then I went and checked for any leaks that were happening on the turbo side, just to verify anything at all. And now I'm going to go ahead and start the intake process. First, on the intake side, we're going to go ahead and slip in our passenger side. Go ahead and slide it onto your intake snout there. Once you go ahead and get this started, it is an 11mm. Now that we have our intake pipe on, go ahead and slip on this air fitting. Just locks right into place right there. Next, I'm going to go ahead and slide our charge pipe into place here. You want to slip it in to the boot here that goes onto your turbo side. Slip on our intake side that connects to our blow-off valve here. I like to start to feed in the 2 10mm bolts here that hold on the charge pipe. And I like to feed those in, that way we get a nice good alignment here to the intercooler. Snug these up, these are number 10. Make sure all these are nice and lined up how you want it to be. Go ahead and tighten the hose clamp that goes down to your charge pipe for your turbo. And then our hose clamp up here for our blow-off valve. On this passenger side, the last thing we want to do is go ahead and reattach this line. Let's also reattach our mass airflow pressure sensor right here. Slide that in so it clicks. Coming over to the driver's side, we want to go ahead and slide in this intake elbow. slide in your driver's side intake, and then it is an 11 millimeter down here on the bottom for the T-bolt clamp, just like we have for the other side. I like to apply a little bit of pressure onto the top of the intake, this connector here. That way it stays onto that snout of the turbo nice and good. Next, before we get too much further, I'm gonna go ahead and just slide in our air box up here, our vacuum box. And the reason being is there's a few loose connections that I want to get done, such as we want to connect this side here down to our wastegate solenoid on our passenger side. I like to just make the few air connections back here now, so I don't forget about those later either. Let's go ahead and connect the passenger side up to the blow-off valve. And I'm going to leave the electrical connectors undone for now. And now the real reason I'm doing this on the, putting this on now is there's a wastegate, our turbo wastegate down here on this side that this connects into. So this goes down, connects into our turbo wastegate, pushes onto it and such. And it's really hard to get to once the charge pipes are in. Just line it up and then here, click, and now it's in place. Next thing is we want to connect the air connector on this side. Go ahead and just press that on. So now we're ready for the charge pipe. On this side, I'm just going to go ahead and place on our hose clamp for now. Next, we want to go ahead and toss in our charge pipe here for our driver's side. Slip it into the snout that comes off of the turbo side. And just like we did on the passenger side, we want to line up these 10 millimeters. Next, you want to go ahead and tighten up the 8 millimeter hose clamp right here. That connects the snout that goes down to the turbo from the charge pipe. I want to go ahead and line up this vacuum box a little better. Put our recircle line here back onto our blow-off valve. And tighten that down with an 8 millimeter. Go ahead and slide your line on here for your blow-off, the vacuum connection. Feed in our last two 10 millimeters here that go for our vacuum box up top, and line those up. Tighten all those down. Go ahead and let's plug in our electrical connector here on the side. We have an electrical connector that plugs in here on the back of our vacuum box. You can go ahead and toss back up this electrical connection and plug that in. This line plugs in to our intake. Come back over to this side, we have one more electrical connection to make, which is right there. And then that go ahead and completes this side. And our driver's side is complete. We're now ready to go ahead and put in our main intake system right here, drop that into place. Now we want to go ahead and take our ZZP intake and reinstall it. Slide your intake in on that side. Slide your intake in on this side. And line up with the grommets. Go ahead and tighten up your T-bar clamps right here. They're an 11 millimeter on both sides. Lastly, for your intakes, you want to go ahead and back on your mass sensor. And then you want to hook on your mass sensor here onto your passenger side and then press in that. Now that we got our intake in, I like to just go ahead and double check all of your connectors that you have everything plugged in. Connectors there, all plugged in. Now that we got our intake on, our last thing that we want to do here is go ahead and put our engine cover back on. Go ahead and slip our Torx bit back in here. It's a T27. And that's going to go ahead and wrap up the engine bay side of this Turbobay's install. Reinstalling on the bottom, we want to go ahead and reinstall our bottom cross pan or tray or brace. You go ahead and slip on this hook in the front. And I'm just doing that more or less to hold it up and start aligning it properly. You gotta pop it on the other side of your fender liner here. Fender liner lip almost grabs or holds up the tray. The rest of our bolts here in a little baggie. Go ahead and start feeding them in. I like to have everything at least into location before I start tightening anything up. Next, we want to go ahead and put back in our fender liner pieces that we took out. Next, we want to go ahead and start to reinstall these panels here. One goes on each side. I like to just start threading in the number 10s first on the bottom. There's 3 of them. Go ahead and put back in the rest of the hardware. You got your clips here. And install the passenger side. Do the same thing. Next, we're going to go ahead and feed in this front shroud here. And what I like to do is first thing is just put in our push clip here, just to hold it into place. Next, line up all of our hardware. You got our 10 millimeters here across the back. And then we have some 7 millimeters. Come along here on the side. Alright guys, that's going to go ahead and wrap up the install of the Turbobays on this ATS-V here. If you did like this video, feel free to give us a thumbs up. Smash the subscribe button if you want to see more content just like this. And just like that, I'm out.